Welcome to another segment of Vintage to Muscle. Today we're at Vintage Motorcars in Westbrook, Connecticut, and we're going to discuss a collector, Peter Powers, who his grandfather had started a collection in a museum. What year? How long ago?
He started probably around 1950.
1950. And then, ironically enough, my father, who's here and works with me every day, actually knew Peter's father. And Peter has retained some of the cars from his grandfather's collection, and we've been working on them periodically for him to get them roadworthy so he can enjoy them. And then my father, Sam Willard, and Peter Powers. And maybe Peter, kind of explain a little bit about your grandfather and how you caught the bug and some of the cars that you had or have.
I caught the bug, all right. This here is a 1903 Franklin Model A Roadster. It's a 4-cylinder air-cooled car made in Syracuse, New York. My grandfather got it around 1940, and he bought it from the dealer. And the dealer got it as a trade-in from the original owner. And then my grandfather kept it till his passing in 1972, and then my father obtained it. And then I bought it from my dad in about 2010. Okay, and so it's been in the family for years and years, for a long time. And there was only one short period of a distant, the original owner for a few years, and then it went back to the dealership, and it sat there for 30 years. So we've had it for quite a while. My grandfather used to own an automobile museum in Southington, Connecticut, the Powers Automobile Museum. And in his heyday, he had 85 cars, thereabouts. He had all kinds of stuff, and I remember as a little kid going over there and looking at them and in awe of them and all and everything. And then as time went on, I always dreamed about having a car, and then I got, I think my first car was a Franklin in 1923, 10B, and I still have that. And then it just parlays from there on out. You just one is too many, and 10 is not enough. So
I can remember growing up, my father always talking about old Doc Powers. Was he a doctor, or where did the doctor thing come from?
He was a doctor of cars. He could fix any car.
All right.
Doc Powers.
I just always remember my father saying, "Oh, old Doc Powers, old Doc Powers," and I don't know how old he was back then, because we're talking. I remember hearing that 50 years ago. Old Doc Powers.
I think all guys were old back then.
Well, when I first met him, it was in the '60s. Yeah.
How old was he back then?
I don't know. Pretty old. Yeah. Because it wasn't long after that he closed the museum.
Yeah, 72 is when he passed on, and he was about 72 years old, I think, at that point in time. So
the doctor came from being a doctor of cars.
I don't know. He was a surgeon of cars. He could fix anything.
I didn't know if he was really a doctor. I never inquired, until.
He had a stethoscope, and he listened to the car. This is wrong with it.
And how did you wind up hearing about him or meeting him?
I was working on a car, a Model T, and at the time I had just getting out of the service and just got a job teaching, and I bought this Model T, and it needed some parts. So he was the closest one to where I was, so I went to visit him, and we struck up a pretty good friendship. I worked on some cars at the school later on for him. But anyway, he couldn't help me with the parts, and he put me on a Donnie Carlson. So it was a chain of acquaintances that got me into the old car hobby after I got out of the Army about 1960, 58, 60, yeah.
Didn't you work on the Lincoln?
I worked on his Lincoln. Well, what happens, he gave me a Lincoln. I don't remember what year it was, but Lincolns were notorious in the 40s of having poor oil systems. And he had conversed with the Lincoln Club, and they had found ways to improve it. And so he wanted me to take the car and take the engine out and make all the improvements, which we did.
And that's one of the cars we still have, a 1948 Lincoln Continental convertible, and my brother Jerry, he's older, he has that.
Is that the green one?
The green.
Yeah. I saw that at the wedding.
Yeah. Yep.
And then, how did what did your grandfather do for a living? And how involved was your dad?
He owned the first Ford dealership in the state of Connecticut.
Really?
Yep. I think in 1923 he opened that.
Where did he have that?
In Southington, Connecticut, and then he went to the World War I, and then came back, and then opened a dealership, and then he went on, and that closed up I think around 1946, and at that point in time he opened up, he had the museum going, and he would work on cars and just buy and sell cars. He had a knack for it.
Why did he wind up closing up the dealership?
I don't know. I don't know. Probably got bought out.
Did he keep an affinity towards Fords? Were there a lot of Fords in the collection?
My dad was a big Ford guy because of that, and no, he had an eclectic collection of all cars. He had Pages and Knox and you name it, he had it. Yeah.
So he kind of had a preference for the odd stuff even back then.
Exactly. If it was different, he liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a lot of the run-of-mill stuff. Crestmobiles. He had a lot of the turn of the century cars, into the early cars, into the teens and stuff. And then of course he got a little bit more. He's cut off, I would say. He didn't have many into the 40s or 50s at all. He was an open wheel guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there a lot of visitors?
Yeah, he had it wasn't like a bona fide, a straight up museum all the time. It was open and closed at will.
Okay.
And he had it going, and he mainly did it as a hobby, not as a money making thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And then one of the things, there's some unique things to the story is that Peter and I, which we met, we actually were in junior high school together.
6th grade.
Yeah, and my wife.
Oh, she was our neighbor in high school. Yeah.
So things, it's kind of a weird story. Things got pretty intertwined through the years here, which we never really even knew it. I don't even know how to go back and articulate it. To make the story kind of blend together a little bit. But when did let's see, I don't even know. Oh, okay, now I know, I remember. So I'm going to say 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Yeah, probably 4 years
Four years ago, okay. This bald-headed guy comes into the building and comes into the shop and he says, I have this Buick and I want to get it running. I can't get it running. So I guess the doctor stuff didn't pass down through the generations. So he says, I can't get it running, and I love this car. And what year was it?
That's a 30 Buick Model 40.
30 Buick Model 40. And that I need to get it running, and can you do that? And I was like, yeah, sure, we can do that. And we kind of got friendly, and then I don't know, I think I said, what do you do for a living or something like that? And he says, well, I'm a half-assed contractor. Well, you didn't say that, but I'll add that part. And I was rehabbing a house, and he didn't have any goddamn money to pay for the bill. So I said, why don't you do some work for me? And then he started doing some work for me, and then of course he turned it into a lifetime job. And we started talking. We started going back. Berlin, okay, went to McGee High School. My wife went there, and then came in with his my father knowing his grandfather, and so since then we've been kind of intertwined. He has purchased, which a lot of people were interested in. My dad had 2 Buicks, and Peter wound up buying those 2 Buicks. From my dad to add to his collection, and we're still intertwined. He's still trying to finish my house, which has been 10 and a half years now, and it was just kind of interesting.
We're still waiting for engineering for you.
Yeah. So it's been fun, and Peter has some really interesting cars, and you just don't see. The other thing that's really interesting is Peter's age. is that you're older than me, right?
Yeah, by about, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes or something.
You're older. We'll leave it at
Yeah.
that. And the fact that he has an affinity towards these early cars, because what I found through the years, being in business, is that the younger people don't generally go for the cars in the 30s, let alone in 03. Is that the demographics are changing. When I first started the business, everything was a Packard and a Peerless and the 30s cars and the classics, and everybody coveted those, and you weren't anybody in the hobby unless you had a Packard. Everybody else would scoff at you. I got a Ford, and it's just funny the way that you lose track of time, and now people come in and nobody, I shouldn't say nobody, but they don't have the draw that they once did. People want cars that can go over the road. The speeds on the road are so quick today, people aren't paying attention. The braking distances are so much shorter today. You're on ramps, you got to go from, you go on a highway, you're on a ramp, you got to be able to go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds to get on 95. And I've just found that the clientele is a little more interested in more of the late model cars. And I mean, when I started, a 70 Monte Carlo was nothing, and then we're restoring them now. We've got Broncos, those Broncos, nobody even looked at them. Now people are spending $200,000 to restore a Bronco. So it's kind of unique, the changes that have happened in the industry, and even more unique is, of course, as a guy as Peter's age, fairly youthful, that likes the early cars, and even still, he wound up buying both of my dad's Buicks, and I'll be showing some more videos and pictures of the process that Peter has going on with that. So it's just kind of interesting to see a younger guy into these early cars, and it's not that common today.
About 30 years ago or 35 years ago, I went to Sam's house with Ed Jacobowitz with the AACA rally we did, and we went over to the house, and that's when you had your shop over there.
Yeah, I don't remember.
And I can remember your father coming, and he got the red wire for that very car.
And so 35 years ago, I met Sam, and I was in awe of the shop. And I'll never forget, up on the lift, they had a Rolls Royce, and he was explaining about the springs were encased in leather, filled with grease to keep them quiet and everything. And I was like, wow, this is big time stuff and everything. And then as time goes fast forward, I wind up coming and meeting Rich, and not knowing that I went to school with him, and the common denominator of classic cars.
I don't really understand how you didn't recognize me, because I haven't changed the stitch.
No, you were like really big and heavy back then too, and bald and kind of doofy looking. Yeah. We all stayed away from him. He's the guy that came to 6th grade with the beard,
Yeah. I don't think I remember. I remember you and your twin brother all just walking in the hall. Both of you looking like the same haircut, and not looking at everybody.
Identical, yeah.
I completely lost track where I was heading with that.
It's funny how things go first full circle, and here we are, and it's always a dream to come over and to hang out at the Vintage Classic Motorcars over here.
And it was funny that you were at the history of my business was, I started, my dad was a school teacher, and he was always interested in cars, and I fooled around with him a little bit. And I was working, I think I was working for an insurance company. I was an accounting major in college, and I would fix up cars and sell them. And as at the insurance company, I found that when I look at my checkbook, the only time my checkbook made a little bit of a bump was when I bought and sold a car. I was like, geez, I'm making money here and on the side, and it was working out pretty good. And then my dad, he was getting close to retirement age, and my uncle, who had an auto body shop up in Berlin, he was working on a Model A for a client, Al Simeone, and it really wasn't the right fit. He couldn't get it done. It was just taking up space. And he wanted to, it was a Thanksgiving we were together, he wanted to go to my dad, and he says, can you do this Model A? And my father says, no, I can't, I'm still in school. He says, but I'll take it if Richard will do it. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. I like doing that kind of stuff. And So we took the Model A, and I was still in college, and did that car, and then the owner gave me another car, and then another car, and then somebody else found out, and this was all in my dad's backyard. And then before I knew it, I was like, I kind of had an accidental business restoring cars, and that's how it started. And I worked out of my dad's backyard for probably 15 years, and then I came over here in 2000, and this has been really good. This location and the exposure on US Route 1, it's a lot better than being in my dad's backyard. I got to say that, and it helped to move the business along because of our exposure and our freedom with space. We've got probably close to 30,000 square feet here. We have storage for 30 cars or more. So, but that's how I basically got started. Was when Peter alludes to the party that we had, was at basically my father's backyard. He had a two-level barn and your collection of cars, and I started in the basement doing Simeon's Model A. Yeah. And that's how we got going. And then we had the car club events, and I guess that's the one you went to.
Yeah, yeah.
Sam, tell, we have this behind us here, we have the '07 Cadillac. Tell the story behind how you acquired that and the process of that, and how you used to, when you ran how you used to drive around Point of Woods, and also how you got your attraction towards Buick. And I've heard this story, but in reference to, I think it was the surveyor guy that was in Point of Woods. And so tell us how you kind of got into that.
Well, I can start back with the one-cylinder Cadillac. When I was teaching, I would talk to the kids and so forth, and I said I wanted a one-cylinder Cadillac. And one of my students graduated, and about a year later he comes, he says, "I found you a Cadillac." And he found this Cadillac up around the northeastern part of the state, somewhere up there. And so I went up with him, and I ended up buying the Cadillac. Then I took the Cadillac home, and I had a place in Point of Woods, which is a summer resort, and it has a lot of roads that are all private. You don't need a license for the car or the person driving it. And so I used to drive that car all over the place there every weekend when there was not too many people down in the spring and the fall. So I used that car an awful lot. I couldn't tell you how many miles, but I'll bet I put a couple of miles every weekend on the thing, driving it around. I just had a lot of fun with it. Then later on, I got out of the service, and I wasn't too interested in cars at that point because I was trying to just get my course and my program at school going. And after a year or so, I visited a guy, which is another long story which I won't get into, but he told me about Hemmings Motor News. And once he told me about Hemmings Motor News, then I subscribed to it, and I found out that there was a whole world of antique cars out there. This is about, I'm going to say around 59, 60, 61. And I looked, and there was an auction in Rhode Island. And I went over to the auction. I wasn't going to buy anything. I ended up buying 3 cars. One Buick touring car, a 90 series, which was a great car, but it had been converted into a Stanley steamer. So where the engine was supposed to be, it had the remains of where the steaming part was, the boiler. It had no rear end because they had put the Stanley rear end in it. But otherwise it was all there. And so I ended up buying it. And of course it couldn't move it because it didn't have a rear end in it. And then it didn't have an engine. So at the same auction, the guy had some other Buicks. And so all the guys, I was kind of green at the time, and all the guys said, "You guys buy all those Buicks because you need them all for parts." Well, I wasn't going to buy anything, but the prices were so cheap, I can't remember what I paid, but they were like giveaway prices, and you probably could get more for junk today for them. And so I bought all of them. And then I had to get them moved to Old Lyme out of Rhode Island, and I did that. And then I started working on it, and I put this big Buick together, and that was a fantastic car. So I got interested in Buicks, and then I wanted to get a Roadster because the touring car was too big for a single guy like me, although it was a great car. And so anyway, and I fully restored that, and it came out beautiful. So anyway, I started looking for Roadsters, and I found some Roadsters, which are ultimately the cars that Peter has bought. And the first one I painted yellow and brown. And it's a sporty Roadster, and it's a very nice looking car. And I knew exactly why I wanted that car and why I wanted to paint it that color. When I was a kid, I'm going to say 10, 12 years old or less, there used to be a surveyor come into Point of Woods, and he'd survey all the lots. There was still a lot of lots that weren't built on. And he needed somebody to hold the stick on the end, you know. He'd say, hold it there. And so I went around with him on different occasions. Every time he came into Point of Woods, he would look for me, and he would find me. So for off and on for 3 or 4 years when he was surveying these lots, I was riding around in his car, which was a 31 Roadster, the yellow and chocolate.
Same color.
And he would, in the back, he'd have the rumble seat open, and he'd have the sticks in there to the stand for the surveyor's equipment and so forth. And so that's how I know. It was one of my first experience working what would be called an antique car. And that's why I know I painted that car that color and why I got the Roadsters. And now you've got them.
Yep, yep.
How many Buicks did you have you owned through your collection?
Okay, I owned the first 31 touring car, and then those 2 parts cars, one of them which I later sold, the coupe, which was pretty much mostly there. And then I had the 2 Roadsters that he's now got.
A 90 up and back there.
And I got a 90 car up and back, the remains of one of chassis. And then I got the 12 Buick. So I'm heavy in Buicks.
Yeah, yeah.
But you know, if you read about Buicks, they never built a bad car.
Yeah. Yeah. If during this taping, if you're hearing noises, this is still a working shop. We have guys working in the shop, so when you wind up hearing various things, it's we're still functioning here and working. We're just trying to put this together at the shop to show the location and kind of get the feel. But that's the noises you do hear in the background are guys working or supposedly working. Peter, do you remember? Is there any car that you remember that really struck you, that you like went riding with your grandfather, your father? And the other thing is I want to hit on. You have how many brothers?
7 brothers.
7 brothers.
Yeah.
There's quite a few of you. And I know your brother Jerry has some cars. He's here in the background. Did they all carry over the affinity for the cars, or
No. Paul has one. My twin brother has a Model A Roadster. Davey, the oldest one, has always had classic or cars, nice Jaguars or something nice, you know, as an everyday driver. But and he also has a Model A. He has a 29 Model A Roadster, you know. But no, Jerry has got a few, but I pretty much got the bug, you know, hook, line, and sinker there.
Now, how many cars do you have?
They're 14 now.
Really?
Yeah.
Where the hell you keep them? I mean, you hide them.
Behind your garage, you know, over at your house in Black Point when you're not there. You know, things like that. You know, no, I have places.
I would happy to offer you my garage, but it's not done, so I can't store anything in
there. So, I only knew my grandfather I was 10 years old when he passed away, and but I remember going over to the museum, and one of them was they had a 1910 Page or something. I would walk over and I'd flick the wheel, and that wheel would spin and spin and spin for 5 minutes, perfect, because it was up off the ground.
You just stared at it?
Well,
is that when they knew you had
ADD?
Is that when they knew you had ADD?
Yeah.
Just stare?
And then he had a 1914 Mercedes, which was always that was the gem of the crown there. And then he had other cars. You'd walk around and look at them all, and every time it was always, well, we never. I remember my grandmother had a 19. I think was it a 46 Woody? Yeah, 46 Woody that she used to come over, the wood panel Fords and stuff. And we used to go out for a ride in that, but that was always. But I was really young at the time, so.
I can't even picture a 1914 Mercedes. I'll have to look it up.
It was
a big car?
Big car. Yeah, that was a touring car. Huge, massive wheels. Must have been 27s on them or something. Big 6-cylinder.
They weren't that prevalent in the United States at that time, were they?
This was a one-of-a-kind car. It was built for the 1914 World's Fair or one of the trade shows, and it was one-of-a-kind car. That was it. Boat tail body on it.
In 1914?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Big V radiator, honeycomb radiator.
Do you know where that car is now? Or
Leo Gephardt bought it, and we've lost tracks of it since then. I think I may have seen a picture of it down in Greenwich, Connecticut. I'd love to find out who owns it and see the car. Beautiful car.
I think I read an article that it went for like $50 million at an
Something
auction.
like that,
yeah. It's too bad. $50 million.
Yeah.
It's just too bad that you didn't.
We took the money we sold it and parlayed it also. But,
wouldn't that be a kicker? Finding out that
it's into the millions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's so it's one of them things.
Yeah. Well, it's like my dad always says to me. He says, "Don't look back. You wind up shooting yourself."
Oh yeah.
And the cars that you own that you let go.
Woulda, shoulda. So we'd all have hundreds of cars in the back.
I was
and the cars you wish you bought that
messed
were
up.
reasonable, but you just didn't buy them.
Nobody knew.
Well, either that or you didn't have
we
like.
Bought, what is it? Apple,
I looked at
stock.
I looked at cars and I didn't buy them because I didn't have a place to put them.
Yeah.
I already had 4 or 5 cars.
Well, I think when I first moved here to this location, I had a guy come in and he had 2 Ferraris, and he says to me, I got one that's apart and one that needs painted, and I was so geared towards, and what we still are, was the restoration aspect of it, and so I was really kind of honed in on the one that he needed painted, and he was talking about painting it, and I was like, yeah, we could paint it, trying to come up with, guide him a little bit and what was involved in doing it. And it never occurred to me, because I just wasn't like that aggressive or geared towards, I was so geared towards restoration, saying, geez, the guy's got 2 Ferraris, why don't you buy them? And when I started thinking that, and I called him back, I said, where are you? He says, oh, I sold them. And it kind of hit me. He said, why? I should have offered or said, here, I'll paint this one, give me the one that's apart. And I would have had a Ferrari that, I don't know what model they were at the time, but I kicked myself on that one. I had an opportunity to have a Ferrari, and I kind of let it go because I wasn't thinking in the regard of always, because I know, like, when collectors come here, every time they come in here, the conversation starts, the big time, not collectors, but the big time dealers, when they stop in, they say, if there's any cars for sale? And then you say, my dog just died. Do you know any cars for sale? That's all. Do you know where there's any cars? Collectors, I'll buy. They're driven cars. Do you know any old ladies that have cars? And 5 minutes of, do you know where there's any cars for sale? And I just was never that directed towards trying to buy somebody's cars and flip them. We were always more geared towards the restoration aspect. And we have the showroom, we do sell cars, but it's not, some of these dealers that have 50 or 60 cars in their collections that they sell or try and sell. What cars did you sell through have you sold that you never sold any?
Nope.
You kept them all?
Everyone. Yep.
Huh.
Yeah.
Really? That's odd. So what did you drive when you were, now you were still in middle school when you were 16, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah.
Because they held you back, what, 6 times?
Yeah.
Well, basically you have like 12 years education, but all 12 of them were in the 6th grade.
The hardest, My first car was a Pinto station wagon.
That was a beauty.
76 Pinto station wagon.
Did you drive that in high school? Going to?
With wood? No, in high school we had the '69 LTD.
Well, who got you the Pinto station wagon?
That my dad had it.
Oh,
I got it
so
from him.
you were not the favorite son, obviously.
No.
We wanted to get rid of you. Here, take this Pinto. Always keep it filled with gas. It'll be good.
Simulated wood grain vinyl siding with plaid seats in it. Oh my God! And so
And you didn't have any girlfriends either, I was
I
assuming.
used to be in the boating industry, and I spilled a whole gallon of polyester resin on the seat, on the front seat, and it dribbled down, and it never hardens really. So now, when I would go on a date, I had to put a towel down on the seat, and they would sit. This is my car. Where you had to unroll the windows because of the styrene spill.
Oh. Was the guy upset about the smell?
No, just the women were.
Well,
But this here car, the '03 Franklin.
No. I want to talk about the Pinto. There's a lot of stories with the Pinto. So how long did you have that? Did other people make fun of you? Well, the Pinto in its day.
No, we were a Pinto family. We had like 4 or 5 of them at the time.
How did you upgrade to the Bobcat? The Mercury?
No. We had the Pinto Runabout. That was one. We had 2 station wagons, and then we had another Pinto Runabout. One was the hatchback one, and
Was that the carryover from your father with the Fords?
It was, no, my dad had 8 children, and it was the only thing that was affordable at the time.
Oh.
Yeah.
And did he have life insurance on you, I'm assuming, at the...
Oh, yeah. Blow up and stuff.
How long did you have... Well, at least he knew you weren't going to speed in it.
Let's see, we had them. I had it for years. After I graduated college, I drove it for a while, Yeah. And I traded it in a car or something, and on a truck, and moved forward. But yeah,
I remember one of the back in the gas crunch in the '70s. One of the worst cars. My father. I had a '68 Camaro that my first car that I had was a '68 Camaro that was donated to the school, and because I don't know if we touched on this, is that my dad taught auto mechanics at Bristol Eastern High School for.
Dave Zabel taught electronics, and
years.
it was his wife's car. Yeah. And she was getting rid of it.
So he got this Camaro in, and he did it over for me, and that was my first car, and I liked it. I got real tired real quick. I had that big Hirsch shifter, and I just got real tired of shifting. To this day, after that, I don't really like the...
Men like to shift.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm a girly man.
You're not a shifty guy.
No, that just I don't know, it's just, every time. And I remember how I figured out how to drive it was I went to Point of Woods, because Point of Woods was this hilly, short stop, and I went in there. I spent half a day, holding it on the hills where I didn't have to worry. Nobody was there in the wintertime, and that's why I learned how to drive it. But then I think then we got into the gas crisis, and I wanted a car that had good gas mileage. And my father says, well, I found this Chevy Chevette, and it was in Bristol somewhere, and Chevy Chevette.
That was a Pinto.
Oh my God! I can remember driving. I had a girlfriend who lived in Montville, and I had girlfriends.
That was the impressed her, a nice Chevette.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're on the highway and you were in over gum, you had to downshift to second gear. That thing, that thing was. Oh my God!
That was the same girl I used to date. My Pinto.
You never had the caliber. You never had the caliber that I had. I've seen some of the pictures. It was just not good. Jerry showed them to me. So I just remember that as that car, just those cars and the good gas mileage, but not like today. I mean, just the thing had absolutely nothing. There was no get up and go. I'll be lucky you got that thing up to 60 miles an hour, that Chevy Chevette.
One of the Pintos, the '73 Pinto, we blew the engine. Okay. No, maybe that was in the '76 Pinto. We blew the engine. And it was a 1300. So we pull that out, and we had another car that got damaged, so we threw a 1600 into it, you know, 4-cylinder 1600, but it's a bigger engine. So we had to modify the motor mounts. But now the radiator was too close to the front, so my dad's like, well, couldn't get a radiator hose. So we took an Electrolux vacuum cleaner hose and attached it to the block and wrapped it all the way around the block and came up the other side to the radiator.
And it worked?
Yeah, that was the upper radiator hose.
Oh,
Yeah.
smokes.
Yep. Yeah, we had like 4 of those Pintos at one time.
Did you ever have, I remember, because there was a big dealer in New Britain, was Tefano's. Did you ever have an American Motors cars?
No. I think he bought the original Pinto from Berlin, Monaco, is it?
I don't remember.
He was a Ford dealer down
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Berlin Motors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe down here, maybe down in Niantic.
Oh.
That Crest, it's now Crest, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he bought it from there.
Yeah, it's funny when you go back to some of the cars that you.
Yeah, shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Yeah.
I shoulda kept that.
Yeah, yep.
Man, I like that. Yeah.
On this 03, did you ever have it running and driving? Do you ever remember? You ever
My
remember?
dad used to drive it all in about 1983 or something. It was in the garage, covered, tarp on it and everything, things all around it. And I got the bug, and now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, let's do some research on it. So we took it out, cleaned it up and everything, and down in the back is where the gas comes from, and the air comes from the carburetor up into the engine. In the middle of it is this barrel carburetor. It's a barrel valve. I mean, it's just a barrel valve that attaches the 2 pipes together. And it's missing back in 1983 when I first started looking at it. And so we did some research and we saw it in a book, and we saw this little barrel valve. And we're like, that's what we need. Now, my mother used to always get upset with my dad and just used to take boxes of stuff and throw them out. Just car parts and nuts and bolts and stuff like that. Just throw it out. And I'm down in the shop and I'm like, boy, I need this barrel valve, part of the, okay. I lift up the top, the next box on the top, it was sitting right on top. It probably would have been the next box to be thrown out.
Yeah.
And it was like, the key to the puzzle,
Yeah.
And, we put it on, and sure enough, it's the original piece, and all went together perfect, And, then we worked on it, and my dad had it running really well for years. He used to go to car shows. Him and I used to go all the time to all different car shows, Milltown, and we went up to some up in Ipswich, Massachusetts, to the Crane residence and stuff. And he really, really had a phenomenal time with it. It was a real joy in his retirement life that he used to take it all the time. Almost every weekend we'd go out on it, and if I didn't, he would go on his own,
Wow.
Yep.
It's funny, one of the things I look at it is the non-skid tires.
Yeah.
My father, which still has a 1912 Buick with the big tires on, and he had the big non-skid written on them. And I remember so many times people were just amazed at the non-skid written on a tire. Not even they wouldn't necessarily even review the whole car. Look at those tires. Look at that non-skid tires. And I never even knew they made them in a small tire like that. I don't know if they still make these?
Yeah,
they do? Yeah.
They're hard to get. Like right now, I'm trying to buy the white ones to put on here, and then nobody's got them, and I don't know when they're going to.
They may be starting a new production line of them.
Yeah,
Coker.
see, they don't have enough call, That's why.
Is that it? Yeah.
Well, if they could, if they had a call for 300 or 400, don't think they'd be making them.
They would, yeah,
But to get now, he's got my 4. I'm asking for 4 for your car,
yeah.
and I don't know how many other guys he's got asking for.
Yeah. So it's hard, Yeah, this old stuff, it's getting fewer and farther between.
Yeah, yep.
Yep. Well, every car you drive is different. How you start it, the old ones, you push buttons on the floor, you push buttons on the dashboard, they all start differently. Well, we got this one started down at the cottage, and they were, boom, 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 it's picking them off and it's running. And all right, so here we go, and we're gonna go and we're gonna drive the thing down the road. And so we get it going a little farther, it's moving along, and we're gonna hit the brake. the car goes whoop and starts going backwards. Reverse is the pedal on the floor. You push that down and the car goes in reverse. The brake is another thing on it. You know?
I think a Model T, now Model T is if I'm mistaken, I haven't driven one in years, isn't it all the way down low and high, or is it reverse? I know there's
Well,
something.
the Model T uses a planetary system, and all these cars do. That Cadillac, this car's got planetary system. And actually the first automatic transmissions were made with Model T transmissions. The Model T is a little different. Most all of the early cars do not have the brake on the transmission. Ford put the third pedal in and used the brake on the transmission. So he had the reverse and 2 speeds forward, but instead of putting the brake on a separate system, he put it on one of the bands in the transmission and put the foot brake on there. And that was his contribution to it.
Yeah.
In fact, the first Model Ts that came out were only 2 pedals.
Yeah, this is 1903. It's a 2-speed transmission. 2 speeds forward, 1 reverse on it.
Yeah.
We even have the original battery for it.
Wow.
A 4-volt battery, lead encased battery.
Well, I know we're trying to get it running here.
Yeah,
It's a little tricky.
I have faith.
A little tricky, but we'll get it.
Hopefully I brought it to the right place. Huh?
Yeah. At least you made the right choice.
Time will only tell.
At least you made the right choice in hiring people. All right, well, that wraps it up for this edition of Vintage to Muscle. Thank you for watching, and please stay tuned. We'll try and do this some more with some different cars, and maybe go over to Peter's place and see how he's doing on the car that he's restoring that he got from my dad, and maybe visit my dad's place where I don't think he has a couple cars left, but where I basically started the business. But thank you very much, and again, until next time.